This is a fun little transition combo from a pole sit to an inside leg hang or a flat line. For this combo, you should be 100% comfortable with your pole sit and hanging out in it. You also should be very comfortable with your cradle. If you are still in the process of getting comfortable with your inside leg hang, I wouldn't discourage you from trying this because for some people, depending on where they're at with their invert journey, learning how to drop down into an inside leg hang is a great way to work on it more. So for this one, you should be familiar-ish with an inside leg hang, but it doesn't have to be mastered to start working on this combo. So we're going to start in our pole sit. Whichever direction or whichever side you want to end up in your leg hang, you want your pole sit to be tilted to that side, okay? Remember, to get our pole sit to feel comfortable and solid, we have to kind of tilt our hips. So whichever side you tilt your hips towards, that's going to end up being the side that the pole is in when you go into your leg hang at the end, okay? So hand position, really important on this one. We're going to break this down into the 3 separate pieces: pole sit to cradle, cradle, transitioning to the leg hang. For my pole sit initially, like I said, we're going to have this slight tilt. And really important with this is that I start with my outside hand, top hand, no higher than my face. Okay, because for this, to go into my cradle, I want to end up with my torso relatively even between my upper and lower hands. And if I start with this hand up here, it's going to be really hard to get that bottom hand into an optimal pushing zone. So I want to make sure this top hand is about face chest height. Now here's where it gets tricky. This other hand is going to sneak between your legs. And this is one of the parts that gets people because your legs are in the way. Okay, this hand is going to go between your legs, but it's not actually going to grab the pole yet because it doesn't have a place to grab the pole until your legs move. Basically, this hand is going to go between your legs as a placeholder. So in this pole sit, I want to make sure that my legs are in kind of a scissor position, not cross ankle. More scissors so that I have room for that hand. My hand, because it's kind of hard to see sometimes because my legs are all up in there, is this hand is going to go down and just rest. I'm not gripping. It's just there. Palm of my hand is pushing against the pole. And then what's going to happen, that happens fairly quickly, so you may or may not see it happening, is that as my leg comes around the pole, this hand was here and it shifts. Okay, so the spot where it starts and the spot where it finishes are not the same. Little quick tip, I like having a pointer finger down unless I'm doing static rotations, but that's a personal preference. If in your cradle you prefer to have all the fingers wrapped, finger pointed down, do you, boo. Either one works with this, okay? So we're in our pole sit. Our legs are scissored and open. My top hand is no higher than my face. Other hand, placeholder. I need to lean so much that this top hip is holding me. You don't have to let go, but I need to be leaning so much that this top hip is kind of working like a hand because that becomes my 2 points of contact so I can move this leg, okay? If I'm not leaning enough to the side, you better have a really good grip with this top hand because there's going to be a moment where your body is going to drop. So I want to be, instead of being center-ish, I want to lean so much that I really feel this hip pushing into the pole. I think of using that hip like a little lobster claw hand to hold me on the pole, okay? So top hand, hip, I'm leaning to the side. I have that placeholder hand, which now allows me to move my other leg around. And as I mentioned already, this hand rotates to get me into the cradle. So let's look at that again. Pole sit scissor, top hand face height, legs are scissored, hand is in a placeholder. I'm leaning so much that my top leg is catching the pole. Other leg drops, comes around, and squish. Legs can be bent or straight, personal preference. My body is relatively even between my hands, really important. Now, from here, this is where it also starts to get a little tricksy, if it wasn't already. To take it from our cradle to our inside leg hang, depending on your flexibility. And no, you do not need to be flexible to make this trick happen. People who are more flexible are able to cheat this trick. And when I say cheat, it's not really cheating. They just have a little more leeway with it. The less flexible you are, the more you have to make sure that you slide that bottom hand and drop your head to get to this inside leg hang, okay? If I'm in my cradle here, and I want to just go here, I'm relatively flexy that I can bring that leg up. But if your flexibility does not allow that, you're going to have to make sure that this hand slides so that there's space for that leg to come through. Okay. So we've done our pull sit to our cradle, and you can do these in two separate pieces to kind of energy conservation, right? Don't feel like you have to do the whole thing together. Once we are in our cradle, you can pause, not pause. Now we're holding with our bottom hip, okay? When we were initially in the pull sit, I was saying we were leaning so much that our top hip was holding. Now in our cradle, that top hip may or may not be making major contact, but our bottom hip has now become our major point of contact. So we kind of have 4 points of contact if you count both hips, but this one might not be there. So we have 3 points of contact, 1, 2, and 3, okay? As we start to transition to that leg hang, we have a couple of options here. Our goal is to go to an inside leg hang, but I'm going to show you a couple of modifications, training wheels, as you may, if you're struggling with this transition initially. So as I start to transition this, I already talked about having the height of that top hand not too high. A really important thing on this transition is our instinct quite often when we're in this cradle, and especially as we start to go to this transition, is to pull with this top hand. But to actually make this cradle more solid and this transition more solid, I need to actually start pushing with this hand, okay? You don't have to change your grip. You can. Sometimes I'll change my hand to a cup grip, but you don't need to change it. Just be aware that you're not engaging your bicep and pulling in. You're actually more engaging your tricep and you're pushing away. And it doesn't have to be to a fully extended arm, but just it's that tension of a push, okay? That push away is actually going to be a counter to this hip, and it's going to lock you in even more, okay? And as I also said earlier, our torso is relatively in the middle of our hands. You don't want to have your hand really close to your body. We want it down here because that's going to be less pressure on that wrist. If that wrist is really close to your side, it's going to be a lot of pressure on that bottom wrist, and it's going to make this transition much more difficult. Okay, so we're in this cradle. Starting it from the floor, kind of like I just did right there, you may find is a little more challenging because we do really need to slide that bottom hand, and if we run out of space, it does make it harder to hook that leg. So just something to keep in mind. If you're going into this and you're like, I'm sliding my bottom hand as far as I can, and I still can't get my leg, you may find starting a little bit higher up, going from the pull sit to the cradle at a little higher elevation might help give you a little bit more space. Okay, so from our cradle, talked about our hand position. Now as we start to go from our cradle to our inside leg hang, the legs can stay bent, the legs can stay straight, totally up to you. In a perfect world, that inside leg is going to stay bent until as we tip, it'll circle around relatively straight for a moment and then rebend to hook the pull, right? So I'm here, I'm pushing with this top hand, leg circles and hooks right here, okay? So as I start to go into that, the difference between being able to hook that leg and not hook that leg quite often is how much I slide my bottom arm and making sure that my head goes with it. As humans, we have an amazing ability of self-preservation, which is good. It's kept you alive this far. But part of that is we tend to want to keep our head up and see what's going on up here. So majority of pullers, when they do this transition, they're trying to watch what's going on with their leg up here, which means it's really hard to bring that leg up. So be very conscious of that we're trying to slide this hand and at the same time dropping the head down, sticky pull, dropping the head down so that we can hook that leg better, okay? So let's look at our cradle transition going through. We are in our cradle. I'm pushing with my top hand. Legs can be bent or straight. Slide, 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 slide. It's kind of like a upside down apprentice. Then this leg hooks. If you're getting to this point or you keep sliding and not getting to this point, a good modification is take your outside foot, put your foot on the pole, and that gives you a little additional point of contact. Use that to help you hook this inside leg, okay? Sometimes that whole sliding either doesn't feel comfortable Or maybe you have a day where your pull is super grippy. Like my pull's feeling a little sticky right now. Actually, sliding is not feeling so easy. And quite often in pull, when we want to stick, we slide. When we want to slide, we stick. So if you're finding that that bottom hand is just not dropping as far, and or maybe flexibility wise, hip mobility wise, you're having a hard time hooking that leg, use that outside foot to hook the pull so you can then reach the other leg around. So I'm going to give you a little backwards. I'll save you the crotchy view. We'll give you the head view so you can kind of see what's happening with the legs there. So we are in our cradle. Open, dropping back. My foot comes to the pull and I'm pushing with my foot. That allows me to slide this bottom hand and then hook this leg. And then to get out, grab with that hand right behind the knee, back to your cradle, taking it down to the floor, or you can go back to a pull set. Okay, so that is a little combo transition from a pull sit through a cradle to an inside leg hang or flat line. You can do it on spin, you can do it on static, you can do it relatively low, you can break it into two parts, you can put it all together. Try it out, try it on both sides. Let me know how it goes and see if you maybe can put it together with maybe one or two of your other favorite moves to create your own combo. That's how we start to create combos, is we take a few other ideas and then we have another move that's maybe one of our favorites and we add that in. And if you'd like more breakdowns on combos, in-depth tutorials, you can find all of that and more in my EVFit online pullers program, where I do in-depth breakdowns like this, but so much more than you're going to find on YouTube and other places like that. And you can find all of that on www.elizabethbfit.com. Happy pulling.